on spending that money, right? If there's internet here or social media, this could be throughout the whole year. If this happened to be, say for example, a company focused on skiing, if you were a ski resort, what would you generally see on this blocking chart? Usually, before the winter season, or leading up to the winter season, say October, November, you would start seeing almost a blitz, right? Because it's a seasonal industry. You don't see ski resorts advertising on TV in July, right? But come September, October, November, start getting blitzed, right? Because it's a seasonal or cyclical industry. So this as well helps you tell a story. And it's a very simple model to use. It's simply all of the marketing vehicles or the different tools you're planning on using in your strategy, and your yearly timeline on how you're going to actually be putting those tools in place. But part of implementation. The implementation part, and I kid you not when I say this, it should be the most, if not one of the most important elements of your case. But this is the area where most students make a lot of mistakes. Simply because they don't put a tremendous amount of focus on it. I don't know if it's just because they're tired, because it's at the end of the case. It's one of the last things you need to do. So, okay, quick little action plan, implementation plan. But just take a step back and say, what good is any recommendation or analysis that you've done if you have no idea how to actually implement it in action, like to actually put it in place? Unless you can properly illustrate that and illustrate the feasibility of doing it, right? It's asking yourself, if you were a client and somebody was presenting a recommendation and a strategy to you, what is it that would be important to you? You need to understand, what do I do Monday morning? What do I actually do? How do I put this in place? Great, you gave me a great idea. So what does that mean? Right? It could be, it could be a product launch for a new product line. Identifying the retailers, you need to contact suppliers, you need to, there's steps involved in introducing a new product. All of those steps are important. It's not just, we recommend within the next 6 months you implement this new product. How do I do that? Right? So your implementation plan, a good way to break down specifics, you can break it down in terms of short-term, medium-term, long-term. You can break it down in terms of immediate, right? So what do I do next week to get this entire strategy off the ground? What do I do in the first 0 to 3 months? Maybe the first 0 to 3 months is research and development, right? 0 to 3 months. What do I do in 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12, 24, and then 24 plus, just long term? Bullet points under each one of these headings, and you explain what needs to be done throughout the schedule to actually realize the particular strategy that you're recommending. Make sense? And then you lead into your conclusion, where you're reinforcing the recommendation you made. It's the opportunity you have to really hammer home any type of key points you've been trying to make throughout the presentation. You could end it looking at key takeaways that you want the judges or audience to walk away with. And it gives you the opportunity to bring the presentation to a close and open the floor to questions. So just some quick tips: be specific, concrete, tangible. Don't just regurgitate the case. Get to the meat of the case, break it down any way you can. It could be trying to analyze their financials. And you don't have to get fancy. I'm not talking about, net present values and so on, but just an initial, how much profit do they make on their sales? Simple. But those types of things, those types of variables will give you a much better understanding of the organization, of the problem, of the case, of things you should be looking at, issues you need to be resolving, right? Have a logical flow. Use visuals where possible. Because think of an entire presentation that's going to be just bullet points, right? The goal isn't to have this be your presentation. You're your presentation. This is a guide to the presentation, right? This is simply there to guide the audience down the road that you've embarked on. That's what this is here for. But it's not the presentation. You're the presentation, right? So visuals will help and so on. But don't be relying on all of the information being depicted here, right? Don't use that as a crutch. It's there to support you. It's there to complement the message that you have. It's there to facilitate the arguments you're trying to make. But it's not there to be the presentation. Make sense? Some presentation tips. How many of you are scared to death of presenting in front of an audience? I'm sure a lot of people might have mentioned this, but it's a bigger fear than death for a lot of individuals, according to a lot of statistics. Presenting, public speaking. I can tell you from experience, presentation ability, overall communication skills, it's probably the biggest transferable skill you'll walk out of this school with. No matter what field you go into, no matter how technical, no matter how soft, it literally will be one of the key skills that you would need to have developed. I get nervous every time I need to present. When I teach a new class, the first day of class, I get nervous. In the first 20 minutes, I get past it. A little eye contact, now I've got some friends, now we're good, we're comfortable. We're comfortable for the rest of the semester. But those first 10 minutes, nervous. You just got to kind of plow through that, right? In the industry that I work in, I'm working as a program manager for Bombardier Aerospace, and I represent customers that buy business jets, that buy private planes. So the John Travoltas and so on, and these are the individuals I deal with in my day-to-day. Customer I have now is worth about $11.5 billion to the organization. And these are the people I need to be interfacing with on a day-to-day basis. I'm in that role not because of my engineering background, which is zero. Not because of my technical ability, which is also zero. I almost had trouble connecting this USB stick. All right? But it's just fearlessness of being in front of that audience. Right? And that, if anything, if you walk away from even this event with just a 2% increase in your confidence, standing up in front of people, it's already been a tremendous success. Now, a few things to remember. It's easy to say be confident, right? Be confident. It's easy. Nobody knows how confident or non-confident you are. So you hide it. Don't say sorry. What does that mean? If you misspoke or you skipped a bullet point, don't apologize. Because I can guarantee you the moment you say sorry, that's when you've drawn attention to that mistake. And even somebody that didn't catch it now knows you made a mistake. Sounds simple enough, but just keep going, right? From a presentation point of view. If there's a Q&A period, a question and answer period, there is?
There is.
Be very, very careful how you add to each other's questions, to each other's answers. Because there's this tendency where somebody answers a question and you're there thinking, she didn't really say everything that needed to be said, I'm going to add to it. And then another team member says, oh, they missed this point, let me add to that. I don't think the audience quite understood it. I think I'm going to rephrase it this way. And you keep adding. Every time you keep adding, you're basically saying, well, since my colleague really screwed up the answer, let me tell you what I think she should have said. Right? So avoid that. Right? Sometimes there might really be a key element to be added that can add value to your argument. But you have to ask yourself, am I really going to add value to the position that we're trying to make, to the argument I'm trying to make, if I say this one point? Am I really going to change the opinion, of the audience with our overall strategy if this is said? If not, don't say it. Simple. Eye contact. This is a guide. If you're going to read this syllable by syllable, nobody needs you there. They can read it themselves. Sounds simple enough, right? And I can guarantee you, and this, might be hard to believe, but if you're using cue cards, if you're trying to read off the screen, that'll make you stumble more than if you're just trying to be conversational with the audience. Because if you miss a point, if you skipped over a word, or if you got distracted by something and now have to turn back to the slide and you're not sure where you were, at the end of the day, it'll work against you, it'll hurt you. So don't try to use it as a crutch, use it as a guide. As long as you know the messages you're trying to make, just refer back to it just to keep you on track. That's the main goal of the actual PowerPoint. Bring personality to the approach. What do I mean by this? I'm going to show you some very quick examples of just some cases from a presentation point of view and what they look like. And they're actually competition level case presentations, so they're very good examples. Say you're trying to identify a target market as part of your solution. You're basically breaking down, we're going to go after women between the ages of 18 and 32 that make this much money a year, that are university educated, that are blah, 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 blah. That's one approach. Another approach could be, let's think of your target market as Lucy. Lucy's a 23-year-old university graduate who's working in this type of a field, making this amount of money. She likes to skydive and spend her money buying cigarettes, but you're creating a persona, right? Think of how much more tangible and concrete that target market now is. How much better you can visualize who that consumer is, as opposed to me sitting here saying, she was born within this year and that year, she makes this amount of money, her mother does this, her father does that, she lives in this geographic neighborhood. Don't be afraid to make it tangible, to make it concrete. The more you can do that, the more you're going to engage your audience into the presentation you're trying to make. The more memorable you're going to be to the judges in that type of a situation. The judges are going to see a bunch of presentations. If you're all going to break down your target market, let me break it down by demographics, geographics, psychographics, benefits sought, occasion for use, usage rate. There's nothing sexy about that, right? Create a persona, create a personality, and by doing so, you're injecting your own personality into the presentation. Don't contradict yourselves. Be very careful. As I said throughout the presentation, you should be following a certain logical flow. Be mindful of time management. How much time do we have for this?
It's a 10-minute presentation.
10-minute presentation. there's certain rules that you should try to follow. And this will, believe me, this will get better. Do you cut them off at a certain point?
Yeah, they all
Okay.
can be cut off.
So it's important even for this one. Some rules of thumb. Be mindful of time. If you have a 10-minute presentation, you don't want to be at the 8-minute mark and you haven't gotten to your alternatives yet. It sounds simple, but very often, even when you practice, one of two things happen when you actually stand up to present. You either tend to go much faster because you're nervous, so you're saying everything really, really fast. Right? So you go much faster and you finish the presentation in 3 minutes. Or you keep losing your train of thought, you're not sure when to pass it on, one team member just keeps babbling and babbling and babbling, that you get to the 9-minute mark, you haven't even given your recommendation yet. Right? So be mindful of time. The person that concludes the presentation, the last person, should generally be, and you know, this is a suggestion, like these aren't black and white rules of thumb, but should generally be the person that's a little more comfortable with time management. Because by the time this person has to jump in, they either have to deal with a presentation that's way ahead of schedule or a presentation that's way behind schedule and adapt their approach to it. If you're not confident that you can do that well, maybe it's just a different role that you're playing in the presentation. And the idea is that you want to work towards your strengths. So it's just something to be mindful of. Make sense? Yes?
Just a question. What do you suggest for the pace of the presentation? Because it's a lot of information to go through within a very short amount.
It's a very, very good point. I would put specific relevance on some of the points that were made in the sense of don't waste your time regurgitating half the case to the audience. If you're spending 4 minutes and you're still just to state facts from the case, and you haven't even gone into the analysis yet, you just wasted 4 minutes that you could have been using to be building arguments. Right? So be smart with where you're putting emphasis. Generally speaking, your analysis, recommendation, and implementation should be the bulk of your presentation. By midway through the presentation, you should start getting towards the recommendation to give you enough time to really explain the recommendation and go through your implementation strategy.
And what would you say for the speaking speed? Like this speech?
It's a good question.
Like how
Difficult to answer. You know, I think a lot of that really depends on individual approaches. Some people tend to speak very fast but are clear and coherent. Some speak very, very fast and you can't understand anything. You don't want to be too slow either, where you're just going to put everybody to sleep. Nothing wrong with taking pauses. A good rule of thumb in presentation: if you're not sure what to say, close your mouth. What do I mean by this? Just close your mouth. Take a pause. Collect your thoughts. Right? And take a deep breath. And move on. And it's just little techniques. And sometimes it's just simple breathing exercises. But if you've lost your train of thought, don't... just quiet. Taking a brief pause. You're reflecting. And therefore looking even more intellectual. And now you're ready to present your sentence. Right? Nothing wrong with taking a pause. And at the end of the day, have fun with this. Like, I mean, as I said, this is a process and a tool that you're going to learn a tremendous amount from. This type of an approach is going to be used in finance courses, in marketing courses, accounting courses, strategy courses, consumer behavior, advertising. It's an approach that's applicable across the board, right? So, you know, take advantage of being able to be part of the event, you know, and you're practicing this, and it's a skill that's very necessary. Think of how similar this is to your boss calling you into his office, or her office, and basically saying, look, this is the situation we've got. We've got 3 weeks to present a solution to our senior management. Put together a strategy or a recommendation I can give them. This is exactly the approach you're going to be taking. Okay, well, let me look at the situation. What are the variables? What's our budget? Who are the players involved? Do I have that department support? Do I have this department support? What's the timeline? What's the expectation? What are the targets? What assumptions do I need to make because accounting won't give me the frickin' information that I need? Right? This is exactly what you're going to be going through in your day-to-day. So this type of, I guess, a thought process, you're going to be using for anything. Right? In selecting what university or program you were going to go to, you used a certain level of this approach, a certain variation of this approach. Now this, as I said, is really just to give you a quick snapshot of what some slides can look like. Nothing more than that. Nothing wrong with showing a brief agenda. It helps manage expectations and guide the audience through what they're going to be seeing and the steps. Current situation, the industry, the company, the organization itself, the most relevant points. Sometimes teams will use a type of agenda somewhere on the slide that will move, and this way the audience is following a journey, so to speak. What are the objectives in the case? So it's an opportunity in this particular case. These are objectives: increasing the amount of traffic, finding new revenue sources, enhancing the overall consumer experience, retaining existing users. So any alternatives that are going to be shown at the end of this need to address those objectives. If they don't, they're not really an alternative. If you say status quo, in this particular situation it couldn't apply, because how could status quo possibly meet all of these objectives, right? Perceptual map, the opportunity. I didn't even need to look at the additional slides to know it was an opportunity statement just by seeing what the objectives were. So it's a logical approach. Going into the recommendation. And what this is, as I said, the more concrete you can make a solution, the more believable your recommendation is, the more engaged your audience will be and have faith in your ability to meet that objective. The team here basically used this approach to say, this is what we're going to show in this part of the newsletter and so on, and really explained it in very concrete terms. They didn't just say, we're going to introduce a newsletter. Right? Anybody can introduce a newsletter. But as I said, what do I do Monday morning? If you tell a potential client, introduce a newsletter, have you given them any guidance at all? Right? The how, personalities. This is how this team described their target market, using these types of phrases. It wasn't just, let me break it down, demographic, geographic. Now, those variables are going to be the main driver in understanding your target market. But trying to add a little bit of personality or flavor to it, it adds a different element to your presentation that otherwise wouldn't be there. Let's see. They created this entire virtual dressing room in terms of online. So real solutions, not just, I think you need to be online more. Or I think you need to, best example is this. I recommend you open a Facebook account. Who the hell doesn't have a Facebook? I don't use Facebook. But other than myself, who the hell doesn't use Facebook? Right? So you think, but how are you going to use Facebook? Telling a company you should use Facebook is one thing. Telling them this is how you should use Facebook. This is what you want to get out of Facebook. Whether it's the likes, whether it's using it to advertise upcoming events, whether it's a way to distribute coupons. There's 1,000 different things you can do through Facebook. So it's not just create a Facebook account. And do what with it, right? So make it concrete. Perfect example. Twitter, Amazon, and specifically what the strategy will be in each one of these vehicles. Not just have a Twitter account. Do what on the Twitter account? Who am I targeting through the Twitter account? Which segment of my overall target market am I going after specifically with Twitter? Right? Financial breakdown. Cost structure. Simple breakdown. $100,000 budget. This is how we've broken it down. What does this tell me? Wow, this entire strategy is going to be based on cinema ads. But now I'm using it to tell a story, right? Break even. This is a timeline. Nobody's expecting this timeline in your first major case crack. But you see it's really going through step by step throughout the implementation strategy and what's going to happen throughout. Right now, if I'm a client and I'm looking at this, okay, wow, this is how they're planning on doing this. Not just this is what they're planning on doing, but this is the how. Then back to the objectives. Did we meet our objectives? And the key takeaways or wrap up at the end. Questions? Are you feeling a little better, or a little more intimidated, or a little more comfortable?
You mentioned not to mention the same facts like price or quality because everybody would mention them, but because everybody will mention them, if you don't say them at all, are you at a disadvantage?
So if I can just get your attention before you leave. Well, first of all, thanks to Bill for coming out. This is for you.
Oh, thanks.
Bill actually flew in from Toronto, so it was good to have him here. I think it was good that you guys actually got to listen to this presentation because it's usually rushed through on the day of DMLS. We're going to send you the slides. We're going to send you the example. I encourage you to bring those slides to the case so that you can use it while cracking it and follow the structure. Just some things as a student who did experience case in his first year. I bombed my first presentation, so don't worry about it if you feel like you're not that great at it yet. That's what this is for. It's meant to be an introduction to case cracking. Yeah. So if you mess up, don't worry about it. So just have fun on the day of, and be competitive, but have fun at the same time. And I look forward to seeing all you guys there. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bill.
In the meantime, because I'm around McGill sometimes and I'm always available remotely, if anybody needs to email me or you have any questions, by all means, get in touch with me.